Welcome. I'm Alfred Weber, and we have the great privilege and honor to have with us Reverend Kevin Annett, who is the Secretary of the International Tribunal for Crimes of Church and State. Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks for having me, Alfred.
Kevin, it appears from the evidence of what has occurred in Vancouver at CFRO, Vancouver Co-op Radio, and in Toronto at another major public radio station, that there is some entity clandestinely, or what we would call under the law a conspiracy, that has an intent to get rid of public affairs programming at public stations, both in the case of CFRO in Vancouver, Vancouver Co-op Radio, and CKLN. Now, you're familiar with both situations, and I wondered if you could tell us what is the basic process going on there.
Certainly. First of all, just as some background, in July 2010, the Canadian Radio and Television Commission changed the rules governing community and campus radio, allowing for the first time ever private, that is corporate funding of public radio. Secondly, both CKLN and CFRO Radio were brought before the CRTC on the same complaint, and that was two things. Both stations were accused of inappropriate programming, that is, inappropriate language on the air or controversial subjects. And they were also accused of not submitting proper financial reports. Well, in the case of CKLN, that caused them to be shut down completely. Their license was pulled and they were completely shut down. In the case of CFRO, Co-op Radio in Vancouver, they were not only not shut down, but they were allowed to continue to operate. And the reason that is because the Jim Pattison Media Group several years ago made a secret deal with the staff at Co-op Radio, allowing $1.8 million of his money to be invested in this station because they knew that the CRTC rulings were about to be changed, the regulations rather. And so, in effect, what went on was a conspiracy between the Pattison Media Group, the CRTC, and the staff, the four staff members at Co-op Radio in Vancouver, primarily Lila Chinia, who seemed to be orchestrating a lot of this, along with Freya Zaltz, who is an Attorney General lawyer appointed to oversee the entire takeover. So definitely there was a criminal conspiracy, and that's an ongoing thing that's happening.
Well, you mentioned Jim Pattison, for example, a Vancouver billionaire, who isn't he a member of the Bilderberger Group?
That's right. He's a member. He's attended meetings in Switzerland and elsewhere. He's also hosted meetings with individuals from that group, including George Bush Jr. when he was president. He had him up to his home here in BC. So he's deeply implicated in that cabal, yes.
And now, as I understand it, George W. Bush is attempting to enter Canada for a visit here in on October 20th, 2011. And at least one group, Lawyers Against the War Law, of which I am a member, is going to have the government of Canada bar him from entry as a convicted war criminal.
That's right, and we have another example of that today at the Vancouver Club, which is a well-documented center where child trafficking has gone on. It's an elite club in Vancouver, where Dick Cheney today, former vice president, is speaking at 5:30. And so it shows you, I mean, this is not uncommon. Canada seems to be an open door when it comes to war criminals.
Now, the Vancouver Club, I've seen information that it has been linked to child trafficking also and sexual abuse. Is that correct?
That's right. As far back as 1994, there was an attempted lawsuit by several lawyers, including Jack Cram and Renata Ogier, who was an Indian lawyer, who named two Supreme Court judges as being involved in trafficking children and in a pedophile network based in the Vancouver Club. Now, they were both disbarred and driven out of their profession, and the photographic proof they had on these judges disappeared. Numerous lawyers and journalists since then have attempted to name the Vancouver Club. The Vancouver province was threatened with a lawsuit from these judges in 1997, which stopped their reporting of it. And we've had eyewitnesses who've seen Native children from the Squamish Indian Reserve brought to the back door of the Vancouver Club as recently as October 2009, where they were brought in by stretch limousine, children as young as 8 years old, and were used for sexual purposes. That, we have testimony from people who observed that. So this is well documented, and Vancouver itself was named by UNESCO as one of the 3 cities in the world where child trafficking is unofficially condoned by both judges and police, that there's collusion in that. So again, this is not just hearsay.
Now, in terms of your program at CFRO, Vancouver Co-op Radio, Hidden from History, you were dealing with these issues, correct?
That's right, on a regular basis for almost 10 years, since 2001, on my program. We were documenting the crimes in the residential schools. It was an open mic for any member of the community, especially Native people, to come in and talk about these crimes they were witnessing. The residential school murders were talked about openly on the show. I fairly regularly was threatened by Leila Chinia and other staff members that my program might face counseling if I continue to air those stories, because what Leila told me once is that they might lose their funding from the federal government, half of which comes from the government, if I continue to air these programs indicting the government for these crimes, along with the churches. So it was a long history of that, and that's one of the reasons I believe my show got canceled, because shortly before it was canceled, we had 2 Native women on the air describing their witnessing of RCMP officers bringing Native women out to the Picton farm where they were killed in these snuff films that were being made. So definitely, I think that was part of the reason behind my cancellation.
And at that time, around that time, I recall there was the release of the Robert Picton examination by a plainclothesman in his cell, and I went on and did a TV show based on analysis that what Picton was talking about was ritual murder at the Picton farm of young Aboriginal women who were taken there by the RCMP. So that's part of what was occurring publicly at the time that your program was canceled.
That's right, and it wasn't a coincidence. 10 days after my program, I was unilaterally banned from the station. And 10 days after my program was shut down, it came out in the Vancouver Sun that the Vancouver police and the RCMP knew that women were being tortured and killed at Picton's farm in Coquitlam. They knew for a year and a half, and they didn't do anything. And the reason they didn't do anything, I believe, is because their own members were implicated in it, and they were sitting on the story and hoping it would go away. Eventually it couldn't, because other independent reporters were disclosing these stories. But definitely I think the fact that the government knew the story was about to break, so they wanted me off the air and wanted these witnesses silenced and not given a platform anymore.
Well, now, included in the public affairs programming at a public station, CFRO, Vancouver Co-op Radio, were programs such as yours, Hidden from History, the program that I was on, the Monday Brown Bagger, and now, later on in the month of October 2011, we understand that the other public affairs program, its flagship program, Wake Up with Co-op, is being ended. Mm-hmm. My own experience, which I would like to check with you, is that I, as a long time, I believe since 2001 or so, I think you and I entered the station possibly around the same time. I had written, I served both the board of directors and Leila Chinia, the program director, with a written demand for a response, because I had been made aware of sworn written testimony by a woman who had been hired uh, along with a man, to enter the station and perform unlawful sexual acts in the station that would allegedly be recorded. And the man was apparently made up to look like you.
That's right.
And that members or some persons had let those persons into the station. Now, I never received any response. And what were the facts there, and why is it that I have not received a response from the board of directors or from Leila Chania?
Well, the reason you haven't is because the same reason that the churches and the governments responsible for genocide have never responded to any of these allegations made against them, because they know it's true. And they can't respond or they'll give the illegitimacy. They simply try to ignore it, hope it goes away. If they had counter evidence, they would have produced it by now. But the simple facts are this. On the date they claimed that I was in the studio with this woman, I was asleep in the East End at a friend's house, and I have an affidavit from that friend describing that, confirming that I was there. They claimed that between the hours of 1 and 5 a.m., somebody resembling me entered the studios with another woman, for some reason went into the Studio B right in front of closed-circuit television cameras that I knew were there, performed sex and smoked some drugs until 5 a.m. Now, this went on for 4 hours without Portland's hotel security intervening. And after 4 hours, apparently somebody came down and these people left. I was presented with that fact and with that allegation, and on the basis of that, unilaterally banned from the station without even being given a chance to look at the video or respond to the accusation. Now, that's completely unlawful what they did, because normally somebody would have a chance to go before the program committee and talk about it. I was just unilaterally banned. I requested on 4 occasions to look at that video, so-called videotape. I was never given a copy of it. They refused to give it to me, although now they're claiming they did offer a chance for me to see it, which is simply an out-and-out lie. And I don't believe that videotape exists. Or if something does exist, it's clearly fabricated, because the woman in question who made the affidavit about being hired to do that confirmed that she was approached by undercover operatives with the RCMP and given money, $200 or so, to go with an individual into the radio station at that time and do this. Now, if people believe that I would appear in front of television cameras and implicate myself and destroy my position at the station for God knows what reason, and that the security would not intervene for 4 hours until that was all safely recorded, I mean, obviously that was a fabrication. But they're using that make-believe story to justify not only the ending of my program, but also anybody who reported that. They've threatened CHLY Radio in Nanaimo that they will face legal action if I'm allowed to appear on the air talking about that. They threatened you, and I believe the reason your program was shut down is because you asked them questions about this completely fraudulent manner in which I was removed.
Now, around this time, there was the infiltration of the programming committee and then of the board of directors by an employee of the British Columbia Attorney General's office, who was also linked with the takedown of a public affairs station in Toronto, CKLN. Could you tell us more about this person?
Her name is Freya Zoltz. She's a lawyer with the BC Attorney General's office. And right after my program was banned unilaterally, and I was banned from the station on this false charge, at the annual general meeting of Co-op Radio, she was unilaterally appointed to the board without any input from anybody. Nobody was allowed to challenge that appointment, which went against the bylaws of the station, where board members have to be elected, from the membership. She was simply appointed. And reporters who tried to look into that were banned from appearing at the AGM. They weren't allowed in. That same woman, Freya Zoltz, appeared before the CRTC to support the application to shut down CKLN Radio using false evidence, according to Daniel Libby and other people who were programmers at CKLN in Toronto. So this Freya Zoltz woman is the shotgun, if you like. She's out there shutting down community radio at the behest of the CRT with corporate interests like the Pattison Group behind them. I think that's, in a nutshell, what her role is in all this.
Now, let me then go to the connection with a very special person who you had as a number of times as a guest on your Hidden from History program at Vancouver Co-op Radio, and that was William Coombs. Now, William Coombs was to have been a witness at the International Tribunal for Crimes of Church and State in October of 2011. And the testimony that he was going to give there, which thankfully has been videotaped, is that he was an eyewitness to a visit by the head of state of Canada, Elizabeth Windsor, and her consort Prince Philip to British Columbia in October of 1964. And at that visit, the Elizabeth Windsor took 10 young Aboriginal children, made them kiss her feet, and then took them away with her and her consort. And those children were never seen again. And there is speculation that these young Aboriginal children were murdered in ritual murders and perhaps eaten even. Could you tell us more about what William Coombs, what his testimony was, what his impact as a guest at Co-op Radio was, what the administration said, and what the impact of his testimony at the upcoming tribunal is going to be?
William Coombs was a regular on our program. He was very active on our network in Vancouver. He was an interior Salish man, 58 years old when he died. As a child, he had been incarcerated in two Catholic residential schools, in Mission and in Kamloops. When he was 8 years old in Kamloops, he saw Elizabeth Windsor and Prince Philip in October 1964 come to the school. They went on a picnic down to what's called Dead Man's Creek. And at that picnic, the Queen and Prince Philip left very shortly with 7 boys and 3 girls, none of whom were ever seen again. William had described that on the air a couple of times. I was told by Leila Chinia that I wasn't allowed to have him back on again after that happened. But William was lined up to come to London this fall to give that testimony before a tribunal. In February, when I went on a visit to England to arrange the tribunal, the day I left, and that's significant because if I had been around, I would have monitored what was happening to William and helped him. But the day I left, literally hours after I got on the plane, he was ordered to report to the Vancouver Native Health Clinic. From there, informed that he had a blood condition which required that he go to to St. Paul's Hospital, a Catholic hospital in Vancouver. Something happened in there, and according to May, his partner, who was an eyewitness there, he was injected with various needles there. Very soon after that, became ill, was taken by ambulance to Vancouver General Hospital and went into a coma. They put him on life support, and in less than 48 hours, they pulled his life support system without family permission. Now, that was murder because they didn't give them time, according to other doctors, that gave no time for a proper diagnosis. They simply pulled the life support system after inducing a coma in him after giving him injections at this Catholic hospital. So I believe it was out-and-out murder. The coroner's report claims that he died of tubercular meningitis when he had none of the symptoms of tuberculosis, and you don't die that quickly, and you certainly aren't pulled off life support if you have tubercular meningitis. So again, as in the case of Bingo Dawson, who was beaten to death by Vancouver police, and then they said he died of alcohol poisoning when there was no alcohol in his blood. This is another case of a legal murder of an Indian, and in this case, a very important eyewitness to this involvement of Elizabeth Windsor, and at least the disappearance, if not the death of these children. So I think that's not only the reason one of the reasons involved in my banishing from Co-op Radio and the murder of William, but also my banning from England on May 29th, at Stansted Airport.
Now, in terms, you're the secretary of the International Tribunal for Crimes of Church and State, and there's scheduled to be a session of the tribunal starting in October 2011, where Elizabeth Windsor and Pope Ratzinger are the principal defendants on charges of child genocide and other war crimes. Do you see a connection between those proceedings and what has occurred at Co-op Radio involving Bilderbergers such as Jim Pattison, the Bilderberger Group having been founded by Elizabeth Windsor, among other parties, the infiltration of the BC Attorney General's office, which serves the Crown, the British Crown, and the person who's occupying the British throne now is Elizabeth Windsor. So perhaps the root cause of the shutdowns of CFRO and then the infiltration of the BC Attorney General into CKLN and shut down this public programming was to cover up the child genocide and war crimes committed by Elizabeth Windsor, head of state of Canada, and her consort. Is that kind of a fair prima facie description of a possible conspiracy here?
Well, I think it's pretty direct evidence. I think all roads lead to Rome and to London on this. Joseph Ratzinger and Elizabeth Windsor are fiduciary officers of corporations that planned and executed genocide. They're doing their best to cover that fact, and fortunately, there's a move out to bring Ratzinger to trial as a German citizen for colluding by ordering bishops and priests to cover up the torture and murder even of children in the Catholic Church. So I think, yes, it's all connected. And in this case of the involvement of Elizabeth Windsor, you got to remember that every member of Parliament, every policeman, every judge and lawyer in Canada takes an oath of allegiance to the Crown, not to the people of Canada, but to the Crown. So they're all Crown agents. So any agency that's funded by the government and the Crown, that is Co-op Radio, is under their jurisdiction and authority. And that's, it's obvious the connection there. It wasn't just to line the pocket of Jim Pattison and help him out, but it was also to cover up these crimes by church and state. And that's exactly what went on. And that's one of the reasons that what happened at Co-op Radio was going to be part of the evidence that we're submitting to the tribunal over the next 3 months in Europe. And we're going to include these people, Littlechinia, Freya Zaltz, and the RCMP officers at the Picton Farm and others who were implicated in covering up these crimes and committing the crimes. And we're going to include them in the indictment. So yes, this is going ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. Was Jim Pattison, Bilderberger member, also to be included in the indictment?
Absolutely, because he's one of the actors in this.
Right. Now, as I understand it, under the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, once there is a finding by your tribunal, which is a duly constituted public tribunal, those findings can be taken to any court of the 120 to 130 signatories of the Rome Statute and taken to their courts under the universal jurisdiction provisions of the Rome Statute, so that these individuals ranging from Elizabeth Windsor, Prince Philip, through Jim Pattison, through the BC Attorney General's office member, through the named RCMP officers collaborating in the Picton Farm, and those individuals who collaborated in the assassination of witness William Coombs, as well as Lila Chinaya, who seems to be a ringleader here, and perhaps members of the board of directors under their breach of trust. They can be indicted by the national courts of one of these countries. Is that something that you plan to do?
Well, definitely. We're going to be seeking in countries like Spain, which claims universal jurisdiction over human rights cases. Any of these people can be tried in their courts. And we're definitely seeking that route. We're accumulating the evidence, which we're then going to present to these different legal bodies to try to secure arrest warrants against these individuals. Other things are happening too. In the coming weeks, we're gathering forensic evidence at residential school grave sites in eastern Canada, the bones and the other remains, to prove that these children died en masse because of violent acts, deliberate exposure to disease, homicide, all of these things. We're going to have the forensic evidence to prove that Canada and the Catholic, Anglican, and United Churches planned and executed genocide. At that point, those heads of churches, any employee of that church, can face trial for these things. So that's definitely what we're going to be doing. Also, a banishment order has been issued against these churches, and it was enacted over the last few weeks and delivered to 31 different churches around the world. Indigenous groups and others have simply said it's time for these churches to get off our land since they committed crime. So all of these actions are going ahead, and they're all part of the same thing that went on to Co-op Radio, because it was our attempt to bring that out publicly. And when you try to shut down public discourse, that's committing a crime. You're committing a fraud on the public, and you're also covering up crime, and that's in fact what the officers of Co-op Radio have done.
Well, Co-op Radio, CFRO, is, as we know, a listener-sponsored station. It is sponsored in part by the members who buy memberships and fund the activities of the station. And one of the instructions which are given to Co-op Radio programmers during 2 annual fundraising drives is to state that Co-op Radio is free, quote, free speech radio, so that people, the members are giving their funds under false pretenses. Is that not breach of trust and fraud?
It's breach of trust, it's criminal fraud, and it's something that should cause them to be brought to trial, because anything committed in that way fraudulently, breach of trust is probably even a mild way to put it. They are covering up and helping collude a crime against humanity by that action. So this is much larger than what a Canadian court to deal with. These people should be brought before international courts of justice for what they're colluding in.
Now, I recall, and this is probably true of your Hidden from History audience, but certainly our audience at the Monday Brown Bagger, and perhaps Wake Up with Co-op also, we had listeners throughout Canada. We had listeners throughout the U.S. We had listeners in parts of Asia, in parts of Europe, and especially here in Vancouver, and also at CKLN for Toronto. These were vital venues of public affairs programming. There were public stations dedicated to the public good by their charters. What can the members and listeners of CFRO, Vancouver Co-op Radio, and those of CKLN, what can they do now practically to bring this situation to justice and to get these stations back functioning again with their proper blueprint chartered focus on public affairs programming?
Well, they have to first realize that they're funding a criminal body, and as such, they're implicating themselves if they do that. So for their own well-being, they have to stop colluding in that, stop funding these stations, withdraw their memberships and their funding until these stations can be brought under public control again. They can go and take over the board, get rid of the present board, and reestablish Co-op Radio as it once was. If that's not possible, then we have to create our own public media, not rely on the CRTC and that, who are colluding in all this. But first of all, people have got to be educated, and I urge people to go to our website for the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State. That's itccs.org. And a lot of this is documented there. Also, the genocide in Canada at hiddennolonger.com. It's all up there if people want to download it. And help us set up forums over the next 3 months to look into these crimes and gather the evidence, because it's happening in our communities and people have to be involved in that process.
Now, the tribunal is scheduled to start in the UK in October of 2011. And the matters that we've been talking about here, the infiltration and the destruction of public affairs programming in Canada at two flagship stations, CFRO in Vancouver and CKLN in Toronto, as you stated, are going to be part of this, because there appears to be prima facie evidence of a criminal conspiracy reaching from the head of state of Canada, Elizabeth Windsor, down through Jim Pattison, a Bilderberger member, the Bilderbergers Club having been formed by Elizabeth Windsor, the infiltration of the British Columbia Attorney General's office, the Attorney General taking an oath to the British Crown, and the board of directors of Vancouver Co-op Radio and Leela Chinaya having been knowing, in some cases witting or unwitting, we don't know exactly regarding the board of directors members, although they were fully informed by my letter and have never responded. What plans do you have to make these proceedings public and the results public so that people can really participate and then be informed, and so then proper action can be taken?
Well, to be honest, Alfred, we have tried continually, and whenever we get to any kind of large enough size, we face serious attack. People have been, in my case, deported, jailed, and banned from England. Funders are being threatened. People who attempt to organize these things are continually under harassment and attack. There's a major character assassination, black ops campaign out against me personally around this whole campaign. And so it's very difficult to operate publicly in any big way with this stuff. We've had to operate in a very decentralized way for the sake of protecting witnesses. What people need to do is to come out more publicly. Now's the time to do this and not allow themselves to be intimidated by these tactics. So I would say that our plans to go ahead like we did before and hold these forums and everything. What will make that possible is if people are filming this. If, for example, at the site we're going to go to in Ontario, we're going to be filming the opening of these residential school graves and posting that on YouTube. Again, itccs.org is the site to go to follow that. And just support our campaign. If people want to be involved in this, please contact me at hiddenfromhistory1, the number 1, hiddenfromhistory1@gmail.com.
Now we're starting to come to the end of this segment, and I'm wondering, since you have been living this and all of the conflict with Vancouver Co-op Radio, and then identifying these perpetrators like Jim Pattison, the Attorney General's office, Leela Chinaya, Elizabeth Windsor, the RCMP, as a human being involved in these issues, how do you feel about seeing the full depth of this conspiracy now coming up into full public view in your tribunal?
Well, I mean, I'm very gratified that after years of trying to bring these crimes out, it's finally being acknowledged. Although there's a two-edged sword, at the same time it's being acknowledged, the government, like, for example, through its whitewash called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, is trying to bury all this evidence as quickly as they can. The only way to prevent that is for people to be very vocal and very active, posting these things across the internet and coming out, when public events happen. So on the one hand, I'm feeling very good about the extent to which I've been vindicated on all this. But at the same time, the more successful you are, the more you tend to come under attack, and that's certainly been going on, over the last year, especially against me personally. So I think now is the time for people to simply not assume that other people are going to do this, but we all have a responsibility to take this task on.
Well, the last time that you attempted to go to the UK to help in organizing the tribunal as its secretary, you were banned from entering and expelled without just cause. Do you think that you're going to the UK now to organize the final infrastructure and all of the logistics of the tribunal? Do you think that you're going to be barred again?
Well, what we've arranged, we've got the ear of a member of parliament. We have several media in London, that all of whom are going to be present at the airport when I arrive. So if the UK border agency attempts to bar me again, they're going to have to explain why in front of a member of parliament, a lawyer, and the media, who all promised to be there. So I think that'll backfire on them and look very embarrassing to the UK border agency, the Crown, and Reliance Limited, which is a private company that makes money for everyone they deport from England. All of them are going to have egg on their face if they try it again. So I would, dare them to do it, because the more they do something like that, the more their own agenda will be exposed.
Now, how can people stay informed about your activities, and keep in touch with you?
Well, like I say, the itccs.org is the tribunal website. The evidence, all of the evidence I've accumulated over 15 years is in my book, Hidden No Longer, Genocide in Canada, Past and Present, and that's at hiddennolonger.com on a website. That book was disappearing out of libraries, so we simply put it up on its own website. Continue to educate yourself and be in touch with me at hiddenfromhistory1@gmail.com.
Well, Kevin, we really want to thank you for being here, and we hope that you will join us again as this important story unfolds.
I certainly will. Thanks again, Alfred.
We've been with Reverend Kevin Annett, who is the Secretary of the International Tribunal for Crimes of Church and State. This is Alfred Weber. Please stay tuned. Thank you.